What price does a nation pay when its chief law enforcement officer holds a secret, personal archive of the most damaging information on its most powerful citizens, hidden even from the eyes of presidents? The United States, a republic founded on principles of transparency and checks and balances, grappled with this chilling question for decades, often without even realizing the full extent of the silent power being wielded. The answer, slowly and painfully revealed in the wake of one man's unparalleled reign, exposed a system where a vault within the vault could dictate political fortunes and cast a long, cold shadow over the very notion of democratic accountability. The story begins not with dramatic revelations, but with the mundane, meticulous accumulation of paper, carefully categorized and filed in the nascent days of America's federal investigative arm. In the early 1900s, a nation grappling with industrial strife, anarchism, and the specter of Bolshevism after the Great War sought order. The Bureau of Investigation, established in 1908 within the Department of Justice, was a relatively small, unfocused entity, often more akin to a political tool than a professional police force. Its records were haphazard, decentralized, and often lost. This chaotic state of affairs, however, presented a singular opportunity for a young, ambitious bureaucrat named J. Edgar Hoover. Appointed as a special assistant to Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, in 1919, Hoover quickly rose through the ranks, his genius for organization and his unwavering belief in the power of information setting him apart. He saw the Bureau not just as a law enforcement agency, but as an indispensable repository of knowledge, a national brain that could diagnose and neutralize threats to the American way of life. By 1924, at the remarkably young age of 29, Hoover was appointed director of the Bureau, a position he would hold for an astonishing 48 years. His first order of business was to professionalize the agency, instituting rigorous training, forensic laboratories, and crucially, a centralized fingerprint archive and a comprehensive central record system. Every piece of paper, every report, every letter, every anonymous tip was meticulously logged, cross-referenced, and filed. This system, impressive in its scope and efficiency for its time, was designed to track criminals, subversives, and foreign agents. It promised an end to the scattershot approach of the past, offering a single, authoritative source of information for investigators nationwide. The sheer scale of this endeavor was monumental. By the time of Hoover's death, the FBI's main files contained millions upon millions of documents, a vast web of interconnected data points. Yet, within this public-facing, officially sanctioned repository, another, far more clandestine archive began to take shape, known only to Hoover and a select, fiercely loyal cadre of his closest associates. This was the Official and Confidential, or ONC file system. It was not merely a subset of the main files. It was a parallel universe of information, physically separated from the general records. Its existence a carefully guarded secret from all but a handful within the Bureau, and certainly from successive presidents and attorneys general. Unlike the central record system, which followed strict protocols for indexing and access, the ONC files were organized according to Hoover's unique and often arbitrary logic. Their contents were not limited to matters of national security or criminal investigation. Instead, they comprised a dizzying array of material: raw, unverified intelligence, gossip from informants, intercepted private communications, personal peccadillos of politicians, judges, and even Hollywood stars, alleged financial improprieties, and details of private lives that bore no relevance to any legitimate federal inquiry. The criteria for inclusion were simple. If it could be potentially damaging, compromising, or embarrassing to a person of influence, it found a home in the ONC files. How was this information gathered and funneled into this secret repository? It was a process born of both institutional practice and personal obsession. The FBI agents, from the most seasoned G-man to the freshest recruit, were trained to be eyes and ears, not just for criminal activity, but for anything that might be useful. A casual remark overheard at a society dinner, a hint of an affair mentioned by an informant, a politician's susceptibility to alcohol noted during an interview. These details, often deemed too speculative or irrelevant for official case files, were nonetheless deemed vital for Hoover's private collection. Agents understood, often through unspoken cues, that certain types of information, especially concerning prominent figures, should be routed directly to Hoover's inner circle, bypassing the usual chain of command. A subtle nod from a supervisor, a specifically coded memo, or a direct summons to Hoover's office for a sensitive briefing would signal that the information was destined for the vault within the vault. Imagine a scene from the Bureau's imposing headquarters in Washington, D.C. in the mid-1930s. The air is thick with the scent of paper, ink, and the faint metallic tang of typewriters. Down a quiet corridor, away from the bustling main filing rooms, a single, unassuming steel door stands. Inside, Mrs. Helen Gandy, Hoover's personal secretary for decades, sits at her desk, her expression perpetually composed. She carefully reviews a manila folder, its contents marked with a cryptic symbol, distinct from the standard FBI classifications. Inside are a series of transcribed telephone conversations, snippets of a leading senator discussing gambling debts, and a liaison with a young aide. The information itself isn't criminal, but deeply compromising. Mrs. Gandy, her movements precise and practiced, makes a few handwritten notations, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. She doesn't betray emotion. Her job is not to judge, but to organize, to ensure that every potential leverage point, every hidden vulnerability, is recorded and readily retrievable. She places the folder into a locked cabinet, its key hanging from a chain around her neck. A silent guardian of secrets that could dismantle reputations and alter the course of political power. The sheer banality of the act belied its profound implications, a quiet testament to the meticulous construction of an unparalleled instrument of control. The immediate consequences of this burgeoning secret archive were subtle but pervasive. For Hoover, the ONC files provided an unparalleled degree of political leverage. He didn't always need to explicitly blackmail anyone. The mere knowledge that he possessed such information, a fact often conveyed through carefully crafted innuendos or selective leaks to friendly journalists, was often enough to secure cooperation, silence critics, or influence appointments. Presidents, cabinet members, and congressional leaders learned to tread carefully around Hoover, acutely aware that his meticulous record-keeping extended far beyond official duties. This created a chilling effect on dissent, both within the Bureau and across the political landscape. Who would dare challenge a man who seemed to know everyone's secrets? The social meaning of these files was profound. They represented a radical departure from the ideal of a public servant accountable to the people and their elected representatives. Instead, they fostered an environment where private conduct, even if entirely legal and consensual, could be weaponized for political ends, subverting due process and creating a pervasive sense of fear among those who navigated the treacherous waters of power. Historians grapple with the exact moment the ONC files transitioned from a collection of sensitive intelligence into a direct tool for personal power and political manipulation. Some scholars suggest that in the early years, Hoover genuinely believed these files served a legitimate national security interest, safeguarding information too delicate for public scrutiny or too sensitive for the regular channels, preventing its misuse by political enemies. In this view, the vault within the vault was initially conceived as a protective measure for the state. However, another, more widely accepted interpretation posits that from their very inception, the ONC files were an intrinsic part of Hoover's strategy to secure and expand his own authority. He was keenly aware of the ephemeral nature of political appointments and understood that accumulating compromising information on key figures was the surest way to insulate himself from removal and ensure the Bureau's independence from presidential oversight. The very act of separating these files, of limiting their access to an almost preternaturally small circle, indicates an intent that went beyond standard bureaucratic procedure. Thus, the debate centers not on whether they were used for power, but when the balance definitively shifted from perceived institutional protection to undeniable personal dominion. Regardless of initial intent, the growing cache of secrets undeniably gave Hoover an unprecedented form of authority. The vault was built, its contents growing daily, a dark and formidable shadow over the American political system. But who truly guarded the keys, and what might happen when the master key holder was gone? The decades passed, marked by seismic shifts in American society and global power dynamics. Yet J. Edgar Hoover remained a singular, unyielding constant in Washington, D.C. From the Great Depression to World War II, through the McCarthy-era's frantic witch hunts, the Cold War's icy grip, the burgeoning civil rights movement, and the tumultuous years of Vietnam, Hoover reigned supreme, challenged by few, defied by even fewer. How did a system, ostensibly designed for national security and the preservation of order, become an instrument of unparalleled personal power, shaping the very fabric of American democracy for generations? The answer lay in the continued clandestine expansion and deployment of the official and confidential files, the vault within the vault that became Hoover's ultimate weapon. The operationalization of this inner vault was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. It was rarely about overt blackmail. Instead, Hoover preferred the whisper to the shout, the implication to the accusation. Information gleaned from the ONC files was judiciously deployed to influence appointments, derail political careers, shape public opinion through carefully placed leaks, and, most crucially, to silence critics of the Bureau or of Hoover himself. Presidents from Franklin D. Roosevelt to Richard Nixon found themselves walking on eggshells around the formidable director. They knew, or at least suspected, that Hoover possessed deeply embarrassing information on them, their families, or their closest advisors. Kennedy's alleged liaisons, Johnson's past indiscretions, Nixon's perceived paranoia, all were grist for the mill, meticulously documented and ready for deployment. The threat didn't need to be spoken aloud. It hung in the air, a silent, potent force in every interaction between the White House and the FBI director. The power of implication was often far more effective than an explicit threat. A quiet conversation, a brief mention of a certain incident from years past during a policy discussion, a veiled reference to unfortunate rumors concerning a political rival, these were the subtle nudges that guided decisions, ensuring Hoover's will was done. For those who dared to challenge Hoover, the risks were immediate and severe. Political figures who questioned the Bureau's budget, its methods, or its vast authority often found themselves facing sudden, inexplicable scrutiny from the press, often involving embarrassing personal details that only a powerful investigative agency could unearth. Career paths were abruptly halted, nominations withdrawn, and reputations irrevocably damaged. Within the FBI itself, loyalty to Hoover was paramount. Agents who showed independent thought or questioned directives found themselves relegated to distant field offices or forced into early retirement. The fear was palpable, a pervasive, unspoken understanding that the director's reach was limitless and his memory for slights eternal. Consider a scene in 1964, in the opulent office of a powerful Southern senator, his face etched with concern. An elegantly dressed man, a senior FBI liaison, sits opposite him, his demeanor polite, almost deferential. The conversation is ostensibly about a pending piece of civil rights legislation, a matter the Bureau views with distinct skepticism. The senator expresses his intent to support the bill, citing his constituents' changing views and the moral imperative. The FBI man listens patiently, then, almost as an aside, remarks, "Director Hoover was just reviewing some older files the other day, Senator, about certain financial arrangements from your days as a young prosecutor and some of the colorful characters involved. All quite cleared up, of course, but one must be careful about appearances, especially during these sensitive times, mustn't one?" The senator's jaw tightens. He knows precisely what arrangements and colorful characters are being referenced. A legitimate, albeit ethically dubious, legal fee from decades past, long buried but never truly forgotten by the Bureau. No explicit threat is made, no order given. Yet the senator understands. The bill, when it eventually comes to a vote, finds the senator absent, citing a sudden severe flu. The quiet atmosphere of Washington's corridors of power, where whispers held more weight than formal decrees, was Hoover's domain, a testament to his unmatched ability to turn private vulnerabilities into public leverage. Then came May 2, 1972. At the age of 77, after nearly half a century at the helm, J. Edgar Hoover died in his sleep. His passing ignited an immediate, frantic scramble for control of his office, his papers, and above all, his secret files. President Nixon and Attorney General Richard Kleindienst moved swiftly, fearing the explosive potential of Hoover's private archives, particularly the ONC files. Their immediate concern was to prevent any embarrassing disclosures that could harm the administration or the institution of the FBI. The panic was understandable. Hoover had kept meticulous records not only on others, but also on the various ways he had pressured and manipulated successive presidential administrations. The discovery of the ONC files and their subsequent fate remains one of the most contentious and debated aspects of Hoover's legacy. There are conflicting accounts, fueled by a desire to protect reputations and the FBI's institutional integrity. Version 1: The Destruction by Loyalty. This is the most widely cited and dramatic account. According to this version, Hoover's fiercely loyal personal secretary, Helen Gandy, acted swiftly and decisively. Over several days immediately following Hoover's death, she meticulously removed and destroyed the most sensitive portions of the ONC files. This was allegedly done following Hoover's long-standing instructions that these highly personal and potentially explosive documents, unrelated to official FBI investigations, should never see the light of day. Gandy stated that she did this to protect the privacy of individuals and the reputation of the Bureau. She reportedly spent days shredding and carting away boxes of documents under the guise of simply cleaning out the office. This version emphasizes Hoover's foresight and Gandy's unwavering devotion, ensuring the secrets died with him. Version 2: The Preservation and Reclassification. A contrasting hypothesis suggests that while some selective destruction likely occurred, a significant portion of the ONC files was not completely eradicated. Instead, these documents were reclassified, reorganized, and absorbed into other, even more restricted FBI archives. This version posits that the sheer volume of material, combined with the FBI's institutional need to retain all information, made total destruction unlikely. It's argued that these files simply disappeared into deeper, less accessible layers of the Bureau's vast record-keeping system, perhaps stripped of their ONC designation, but still very much present, albeit under new, even tighter access controls. These documents, according to this theory, may have resurfaced in various investigations decades later, their origins obscured. Version 3: A mixture of both and lingering questions. This perspective suggests a more nuanced reality. It's likely that a substantial amount of material was destroyed by Gandy and others acting under tacit or explicit instructions. However, it's also probable that some politically sensitive or genuinely investigatory material that Hoover had held in the ONC files was indeed reabsorbed into the official FBI records, or perhaps even discreetly distributed to other secure locations, either by loyalists or by those seeking to protect themselves. This version highlights the chaos and conflicting motives immediately after Hoover's death, making any single, definitive account of the file's fate incredibly difficult to ascertain. Moreover, there's the lingering question of what exactly the files contained. Were they truly as damning as believed, a treasure trove of verifiable criminal activity and deep personal depravity? Or were they largely a collection of unverified gossip, rumor, and innuendo, magnified in power by Hoover's formidable reputation and the fear he inspired? Historians and biographers continue to sift through declassified documents, interviews, and memoirs, hoping to find definitive answers, but the full truth may forever remain elusive. The consequences of Hoover's vault within the vault and its ambiguous aftermath were profound and far-reaching. The revelations that emerged in the 1970s, particularly through the investigations of the Church Committee in the Senate, exposed the extent of intelligence abuses, illegal surveillance, and the weaponization of information by government agencies. These findings spurred significant legislative reforms aimed at increasing oversight and accountability for the FBI and other intelligence bodies. However, the lingering shadow of Hoover's power, built upon decades of secret information, continues to cast a long pall. The perpetual question of oversight and accountability for intelligence agencies, the balance between national security and individual privacy, and the potential for unchecked power inherent in secret data collection, all echo the lessons learned from the official and confidential files. The physical vault may have been emptied, its contents scattered, or perhaps merely reshelved in a darker corner.